You teach people how to treat you by what you tolerate. And I found in past careers that I was tolerating poor behavior, and worse, I started to adopt some of those behaviors just for survival, just to be respected, to be heard, to be able to do my job each day. And it was in those moments where, I finally had to step outside of the day to day and realize, like, I'm not being the type of leader that I want to be. I'm not being the type of marketer or even person that I want to be, because I'm just in this survival mode.
Hello, and welcome to Working Your Way, the podcast dedicated to exploring the journey of authenticity in the workplace and discovering how to navigate it your way. I'm your host, Sandhya Sudhakar. Today, I am excited to welcome Shannon O'Shields to the show. Shannon is the VP of Marketing at Rubik's Foods, which is a leading culinary and food science-focused provider of flavors and ingredients for restaurants and manufacturers all over. In this episode, Shannon opens up about her journey from being handed the keys to her company's social media in one of her very first jobs to becoming the innovative marketing leader that she is today. We dive into the lessons that she's learned along the way, including when she wasn't showing up as the kind of leader or person that she wanted to be, all the way into how she's navigated her career by steering toward the work that she loves. Shannon shares her insights on building safe spaces for creativity, being transparent as a leader, and why she's never been afraid to quit roles that didn't serve her. I know Shannon's story will inspire you to follow your own sense of excitement in your own career. So let's get into the conversation. Great. Welcome to Working Your Way, Shannon. I'm excited to have you on.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so happy to be here.
Yeah, so just a little bit of background on how we crossed paths. I have spoken in my career story about these moments in my career that were like high highs and low lows, and that was kind of ultimately why I left the work world. I didn't leave the work world. I left a job
Corporate
that
America.
that has an organization. And actually, on part of the high working together was when we met, and we were doing some really cool disruptive things in marketing and sales in an industry that kind of needed to be shaken up. And that was kind of the moment that we crossed paths.
Yes. Yeah. It was a really exciting time. And I vividly remember the first time that we met, and it was a great part of my career in terms of just education, but it was a really, really good time and one of the highs for me as well.
So we're going to talk a bit about your career journey today, and I'm really excited to get into that. But I'm curious for you, what does the word authenticity mean? What meaning does it hold for you in your career?
Yeah. So, it has grown in importance to me throughout my career. I think it's something that I probably didn't give as much credit early on in my career. And I think now, especially leading a team, authenticity has become a really critical part of my day to day. I joke a lot that, you're going to get the same Shannon on Friday night at the bar as you will on Monday morning in the staff meeting. The drink might just be different that I have. And ultimately, to me, it's just incredibly important to bring yourself to work every day, because that comes through in the output of your work. It means a lot to your team because they really know what they're going to get and with working with you. And it's also really important to, what you take home with you, right? So many of us struggle with work-life balance. And so bringing your authentic self to work every day makes the, after hours much more seamless. Who you are when you come home, it's not this huge transition. You're closing the car door and walking into the house and having to sort of code switch into who you are. To me, really being comfortable with who I am and bringing that same person to work and home has really helped not only in my career, but also in my personal life. And so I really am intentional about the things that I do in my day to day to make sure that it's authentic to, my personal core values, but also translates to my team and to the organization, and just makes me, a more enjoyable person to be around, but also to really enjoy all the opportunities that I get in work and life in general.
To me, I can hear in that there's this like the masking or the posturing or the like
Yeah.
holding up this persona and then like being so exhausted from carrying it around all day. And I think it's a pretty common phenomenon. So was there a moment or moments in your career where you were doing a lot of that? And how was it for you?
I entered the workforce with just a massive chip on my shoulder, to be honest. I didn't go to, a super recognizable college. I didn't get great grades in high school or in college. And I just, when I went into the workforce, my friends and my community, so many people knew exactly what they wanted to do and who they were going to be. And I felt very behind in that sense. I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do. I knew certain aspects of the things that I was interested in. And because of that, I think I just felt this sense of need for validation. And I really felt like I needed to find something where I could be an expert. And, I talk a lot about how my whole life I've had drive, but I really struggled with direction. And I think that's better than the other way around, like knowing what you need to go and do, but not really being driven to do that. I was always the other way around. I know I'm smart. I know have a creative side to me. I know there's something that I can be good at, but I really struggled to find what that was. And so, to me, it was one of those things where early on in my career, I just got lucky, to be really honest, with someone sort of pushing me in a direction because of, where the world was going in terms of social media and technology. And I was working for an agency and I was the youngest one in the room. And they said, give her social media. And, social media was not a career path at that time, but it gave me the opportunity to, at, 22, 23 years old, be an expert in something. And that was the first time that I had ever really been an expert in anything. And it wasn't because I was the smartest one in the room. It was because I had the most exposure to someone. And it gave me the opportunity to have a seat at the table and have a voice that people listened to. And that was sort of the validation and credibility that I needed to, move forward in my career and to feel much more stronger as not only, a woman in the workforce, but also just as a person, as someone who, finally felt like they had a direction and a path that they could follow and grow and advance. And I started to kind of have my aha moment where I said, this is something I can actually do. I'm passionate about it. I like it. I'm good at it. But, it took time to get there. And a lot of it was, just being in the right place at the right time and being open to new opportunities.
It's funny, like the kind of cliche-ness of it all of like, well, we don't know how to figure out the social media thing. It's it's new. Yeah. Let's give it to the young girl. Mm-hmm. How did that opportunity feel for you? Like what I heard and what you said is it gave you something that you could like be the expert in. And so it was a confidence builder in a way.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I think it happened really fast. So, it was 2011 and all of the companies were starting to adopt, at the time it was Facebook and Twitter. I will not call it X. It was Facebook and Twitter at the time. And, they knew they had to be there, but they really didn't know why or what they were going to do with it. And probably didn't have all the confidence that it was something that was going to have any longevity. Of course, looking back, that's a funny concept to even think about.
Yeah.
But I think it was one of those things where, it happened really fast. It snowballed into something that became a really critical part of organizations' total marketing plans. And I'm talking, this is happening within a year. And so it was a really sort of jarring experience. But, as you said, yeah, I think it was one of those where all of a sudden they realized that they had given, the young new girl the keys to the castle. And, we really need to understand what this means. But, the internet, even, 15 years ago wasn't what it is today. It wasn't something you could just Google and figure out how to use it. I mean, I was a very entry-level employee sitting with the CEO and setting up an account at Speedway, a massive organization, and trying to educate him on how important this program is. And so just having that visibility and having a seat at the table in forums where, frankly, I had no business being in, but truly was, just by nature of this new tool, the expert on that platform. And, I think a lot about this today where this phenomenon is happening again. Things like AI and TikTok and all of these new tech-driven applications. Oftentimes, young people are the experts in these, and it's starting to give, age much less influence in, the decision-making process. It really comes down to who knows the most about the audience that you're targeting, who knows the most about the channels and the opportunities within these channels. And for me, it was just really finally having a voice at that table and people listening and hearing and just getting sort of this respect from people whom I either didn't think that I deserved or just never had the exposure to. And getting that at such an early age, I think really guided me to, the career that I've had and how I help to, educate my team and how I really try to champion, young women, especially in marketing and in corporate America, to kind of have that same path and that same confidence and to be, some of the things that we have to deal with in terms of, imposter syndrome and all of those sorts of things. It really helped to put me on this path to being a much more confident leader.
We just are replaying an episode from like the first couple of months of the podcast, and the guest that I had on was just talking about like your lived experience adds value, right? And that like
Yes.
Just showing up and being you and asking the questions that you would normally ask adds value in that space. And so I'm hearing
Yes.
a lot of that too, is like when you live that experience and just bringing that, but we think that we have to say the right thing or we have to
Yes.
find this well-researched answer. And sometimes that's not the case.
And this is something that is just kind of how I was raised. But, I've never been afraid to raise my hand and ask a question and look stupid. That's just never something that I've been afraid to do. And I think, as we, in our careers, I think that is a really good sort of skill set to have. It's just this natural curiosity. And my questioning things or asking questions was never out of any other desire than to learn more, than to really understand the why behind, anything that we're doing. And, I joke a lot that, early on in my career, I used to always say, fake it till you make it, like being in the room, like you really deserve to be there. But now looking back at, my career and even working with a lot of the young people that I do, I realize now that it was never really faking it. It was just kind of giving myself permission to not be the expert and giving myself permission to be in rooms where maybe I didn't yet belong, but that one day I was really on the verge of being there and that I was seeking guidance to understand how to best, get into that space or get into that new vertical or that new function. And it was never about faking it. It was about really trying to fit into that spot, but bring my authentic self to that spot, not just, be who that person is today, but really bring, what Shannon is to that role. And so I think, I try to avoid using that phrase anymore, but I haven't really thought of a good version of that. But I really do think that is something that a lot of people face, is just kind of feeling like you don't belong in a certain situation or that maybe you're underqualified for a certain role or a certain project. But ultimately, if you were given that opportunity, you deserve it. Right. And if we're all doing things that we are overqualified to do, then we need to move on. We're not serving ourselves. We're not growing. And so I think just, that natural curiosity and that ability to, open yourself up to new opportunities for growth is something that, has been extremely critical in my career, but is also something that I have seen a lot of young people kind of adopting. And that's why we're seeing so many successful young people in business today, I think.
I think the idea of like fake it till you make it, it's like nobody in the room has all the answers. And so what are you faking? Confidence? Like, yeah, of course we should be confident and we can be and know that we have that valuable stuff. But I love the idea of like, if you get handed an opportunity, like you deserved it. And whether or not, however you interpret that, it's like you have the chance to prove that you should have that. So let's talk about this term imposter syndrome for a minute here. Now, the definition of it is a psychological phenomenon characterized by persistent feelings of self-doubt, inadequacy, and a fear of being exposed as a fraud, despite evidence to one's competence. So, as we break that down, it's this self-imposed feeling of, I don't belong here because I'm not qualified or competent enough versus everyone else. Now, there's some really great work that was pioneered by Jodi Ann Burry and Ruchika Tulsian, or now Ruchika Malhotra, that is super, super important in this conversation. And I referenced it actually in episode 1 of this podcast, and we'll link it here again today. Now, the gist of this huge conversation that they kicked off in their HBR article that came out a couple of years ago is this. Do we, women, have imposter syndrome, and this is an us problem, or are the rooms that we're in making us feel this way because they're exclusive or designed for one way of operating? Are we being treated like we don't belong? And this so-called imposter syndrome is nothing more than us having the emotional and social intelligence to pick up on this feeling that this room wasn't built for me. It's making me feel excluded. And so it's not that I don't belong here, but they maybe don't want me here or weren't considering me when creating this place. And it's not always an individual person thing, although sometimes it can be the individuals in these proverbial rooms treating us in a certain way, but often it's also a systemic exclusion. Things like having a style of communicating that isn't the kind of often rewarded, loudest and fastest voice in the room, or not being the type of leader who is self-promoting all the time and taking credit for their team's work to make themselves look really good. Now, those things that have traditionally been seen as being a strong leader are incredibly biased and often just flat out poor ways of assessing leadership potential. So much of the feeling like an imposter can stem from just being designed differently than the people who have gotten promoted and awarded in the past. But the system has been flawed for a long time. So all of this being said, there are sometimes these internal barriers to us feeling like we belong, questioning if our experience is enough to make us successful in a role, or not giving ourselves enough credit for what we've accomplished so that we feel this sense of confidence to walk into a meeting and share our ideas. I mentioned in an episode that we recently replayed, episode 67, that I chatted with Shannon about in this conversation just earlier, recognizing your unique value with my guest, Nneka Ude. And in that episode, we talked a lot about how your lived experience is exactly what makes you qualified to be in that room and to contribute your ideas and opinions, especially when no one in the room really has the right answers, like in a new space in the industry or something in an emerging area of your field. So check out that episode if you want to dive into this topic more. But for now, let's get back into the conversation and hear more about how Shannon got her first opportunities in the workplace. I imagine that at the time when you got that opportunity, there were no right answers. And so
yeah.
How did you approach it? How did you kind of use your talents, or what did it show you about what you're really good at by being successful in this really unknown open space?
Yeah, that's a great question, because you're right. There were no benchmarks, there were no case studies, there were no examples of how to do it right. And I remember early on, trying to pitch content ideas and everyone just being like, we don't understand what you're saying. This doesn't make any sense. Why would you do that? And what I realized early on was that this was more about educating internal stakeholders than it was about, getting any specific post out. It was at a much more macro level, trying to explain to leadership, which at the time where I was a lot of older white men, why this was not going anywhere and why this actually needs to be a central part of our strategy as an organization. And, luckily, I did not have to do this alone. I have an incredible mentor, Christy Frizzell, who was my boss at the time, who sort of adopted social media under her wing at the time. And she was really critical in kind of getting me opportunities to sit with our leadership team and educate people on the importance of this and where we see this going. And a lot of times it felt very much like I was selling internally more than I was working on, content or community management or anything like that. It was more doing a good job of every time we felt like we had a big win, a really engaging post that we could prove drove people to the store, or a great interaction with a customer that solved a problem. I would put those into a presentation and, beg for an opportunity to go and talk about that and showcase that to the people that were making decisions and who really mattered. And, I still do that really similar sort of showcase today. I've always had a bad habit of not talking about my accomplishments, but I've realized how important that actually is, especially when you have a team around you. What doesn't get talked about gets forgotten. And so all the great work that our team does, it's incredibly important as a leader to make sure that work gets visibility, that people get credit for that work in a public forum. I was lucky to have someone like Christy who believed that what we were doing was impactful and said, you know what, I will get you a meeting with the CMO. I will get you a meeting with the CEO, just so you can talk about this. And if we hadn't had that internal champion, it would have been something that was kind of set aside and not seen as important. But every time we had a big win, we had an opportunity to just justify and build credibility for how important and how impactful this could actually be for our business.
So as you navigated the rest of your career, probably looking back on it, it makes more sense than while you were in it. What was your approach to your next move and then your next move and then your next move?
I never knew exactly what I wanted to do. And early on, I got this opportunity to work in social media. And I was able to find, things that I was really passionate about, things that I was good at or felt that I was good at. And that really helped me to kind of pave a path for where I thought that maybe I wanted to go. So I loved the community management aspect, having conversations and really building strong connections with fans. I really loved the creative aspect of content creation and strategy. And so I took those little nuggets and thought, where else can I take this in my career? And I think, my career has been more about trimming the fat, cutting the things that I don't like than it has been about going and chasing the things that I love. I have always been someone who says yes to new opportunities way more than I say no. And my goal has always just been to make myself as well-rounded of a marketer as I could possibly be. And in order to do that, you have to try a lot of new things. So, if I'm not having fun, if I'm not curious anymore, if I'm feeling like I'm the smartest one in the room, then I know it's time for me to go. I love to try new things because I'm not afraid to quit. And I think that fear of quitting prevents so many people from trying new things. I've just never had that. I don't have any guilt. I don't have any shame with saying like, I was wrong. This wasn't for me. And so that has helped me sort of advance in my career in terms of it has given me the permission to take a new role if I'm no longer being challenged or liking what I'm doing at my current role. And so because of that, I've worked for a lot of organizations. I've had the opportunity to oversee a lot of different functions of marketing, whether it's public relations or social media or content, digital marketing, branding. And by getting exposure to a lot of these different things, I've been able to kind of develop a better understanding of what I don't like and what I do like. And it also gives me such a better respect for people who work in all of these different functions, because while I'm not an expert in what they do, I do understand what it takes to do it. And I do understand, the type of skill set and mindset that you have to be great at that. And it helps me to be a better collaborator. It helps me to be a better leader because I've had exposure to that. And so, throughout my career, I have just always been really relentless about finding roles that challenge me and spark creativity, and roles where I feel like I can be my authentic self and have fun, and where I'm not shameful or embarrassed or scared to be Shannon every single day when I come in to do the job.
Yeah, you mentioned this idea of like casting a wide net, right? Getting exposed to so many different things and then
Yeah.
weeding out, right? Like this, don't like this. Want to do more
Yeah.
of this, want to do less of this. And I love what you said about, not being afraid to quit, because I do think that that is something that holds people back a lot. And so
Yeah.
just embracing that is really cool. And it feels very intrinsic to kind of like how you operate in life. So I love that. I really love what Shannon said earlier. I'm not afraid to try new things because I'm not afraid to quit when they don't work. I think so many of us can take a lesson from this. I actually joked with Shannon after we stopped recording that she might want to explore the Enneagram Type 7. Now, we didn't do a typing session or even formally start that conversation around Enneagram types, but what I heard in her career story were these themes of trying lots of things, not limiting herself, saying yes to this really broad set of different experiences, and also cutting things off that she didn't like. Now, the Enneagram Type 7 is oriented toward possibility and excitement, and so much of Shannon's career holds true to these themes and strengths of that type. Now, Type 7s are also blessed with this ability to know what fills them up, what excites them, and what energizes them. Not all of us are built this way, though. In my work with the Enneagram, I can often see how others show up differently than me or than each other. And so this idea of kind of leaving behind what doesn't work for us or cutting things off quickly when it doesn't work might be easier for some of us than it is for others. I can think of some things that might hold other types back from just leaving a situation that's not working for them. For example, the Enneagram Type 6 favors loyalty or security, and so they may stay in a job because they feel like it's too big of a risk to leave, or they might feel loyal to a company or to a boss, and that may keep them there. Or the Type 2, as an example, focuses on meeting other people's needs instead of checking in with their own needs, and so they may find themselves doing what other people need them to do versus really questioning if it's best for them. Now, Type 3, which is my Enneagram type, is another one that 3s often favor achievement and being valuable to others or to a company, sometimes even over their own deeper desires. So they may stay in a place where they're feeling valued, even if it's not something that they're really actually passionate about. And the last one that I'll share in this segment is Type 9s. Type 9s often aren't paying attention to how they feel about things or kind of their perspective. And so they can sometimes take on other people's agendas and become out of touch with their own perspective. So all of this to say, building your awareness of your own patterns can be really helpful. You may be someone who is very in touch with what works for you, and you'll be like Shannon and get the heck out when something isn't meeting your needs, or move on quickly when an idea just doesn't work for the business. And then there are others of us who direct a lot of attention without even sometimes knowing it, mental energy and attention, emotional energy and attention, physical energy and attention directed outwards toward others, and may not have the same level of clarity in that area. So we get to borrow some inspiration from the strengths of our friends that are different from us and understand these things about ourselves. And then this awareness will help you to make a better choice for yourself. Okay, let's get back to the conversation and hear more from Shannon on some of the things that didn't work for her in her career. So in these moments where, you're learning and you're growing, like, did you hit bumps along the way? And what maybe was one of those times?
No, it's been perfect the whole time. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, of course. Yeah, I've definitely hit some bumps. I think the biggest challenge that I think a lot of us face is learning to work with different personalities, people with different backgrounds, people with different approaches to work, different communication preferences. Today, I work with scientists and chefs and engineers, and I'm a marketer and I'm a millennial. I have Gen Zs on my team and boomers on my team. And so we have this amazing mix of personalities and backgrounds and work styles. And I'm so grateful for my past bumps in the road because they were all very much personality based, and learning to navigate different personalities and different work ethics, because it's helped me to be such a more empathetic partner and collaborator and colleague, and learning the importance of understanding how to work with different people. And also on the flip side, learning that people are also learning to work with me. I'm not the North Star of how things should go, right? I'm a creative. I'm a little frazzled and unorganized sometimes. I'm a big idea person, and I think very big picture. And so I need people to bring me down to earth. And so I think the bumps in the road that I have had have mostly been, dealing with people or leaders who I felt didn't reflect the type of leadership or work style or treatment of others that maybe I wanted. And, you teach people how to treat you by what you tolerate. And I found in past careers that I was tolerating poor behavior, and worse, I started to adopt some of those behaviors just for survival, just to be respected, to be heard, to be able to do my job each day. And it was in those moments where, I finally had to step outside of the day to day and realize, like, I'm not being the type of leader that I want to be. I'm not being the type of marketer or even person that I want to be, because I'm just in this like survival mode because of the, work environment or the treatment that I am, allowing in my workplace. And those were instances where, while I loved the work that I was doing and loved the team that I was working with, I left. I decided that it was time to go, because it, for me, was something that, if I stayed, I was going to regress. And a lot of the different kind of growth areas that I had in terms of leadership and respect and being a woman in the workplace. And when you're in an environment like that, or you're in a moment like that, it's difficult to leave for a number of reasons, whether you like the job or it's financial security, or it's, there's people who depend on you. But ultimately, you're not doing anybody any favors if you stay in environments like that. And so it was instances like that where those bumps in the road have now served me in the future. And I'm in a role now where I'm incredibly happy, and I have the opportunity to work with people who are very, very different from me. But I've learned how to harness those differences and to find huge opportunities. And that diversity of thought has actually just made us so much better. And so I'm actually grateful for those bumps, because I probably wouldn't have really seen the value of all of these differences that I get to, deal with and face each day today in my current role.
Yeah. So what did you learn about the type of boss that you don't want to be from a negative experience?
Creativity is such a subjective thing. So, what's a good idea to me is maybe not a great idea to you. I've been seeing a lot of feedback on Super Bowl commercials, and, so many people think this is a great commercial. So many people think this is a bad commercial. In the creative space, it becomes incredibly important to have, a safe environment where people can bring ideas, and their ideas aren't going to be called stupid, or their ideas aren't going to be stolen and someone's going to take credit for their ideas. And I think I was dealing with a lot of that, a lot of, people not being able to bring their best to work because they were afraid of being embarrassed. They were afraid of being shut down, or maybe they were afraid that their ideas were going to be taken from them and they weren't going to get credit. And so, I think one of the things that I learned really early on, and some of my more negative experiences, was the importance of creating, a really safe environment for ideas. And to do that, today with my team, if we're doing any sort of brainstorm, I'm the first one to throw out the most ridiculous bad idea. And everyone on my team needs to come with one bad idea. And that just sets the stage for, it's only up from here, right? And it just gives people that confidence and that security that, we're here to come up with the best idea. It doesn't have to be yours. It doesn't have to be good yet. We'll build on that. But that's something that I really took from that.
So you mentioned like kind of becoming like a leader that you didn't want to be, like almost for self-preservation, to like exist within an organization. So I'm really curious about especially for someone who does leave things that are not, right for you, it's important, I think, too, to just talk about like sometimes there's a slow creep in these things, and
Yeah.
we find ourselves farther away from like who we actually are. And so I'd love for you to share just a little bit about like what was that experience like for you, how you saw yourself start to change, and like what did that mean?
Yeah, you're right. It's not something that necessarily happens overnight. One of the things that I hear from people is that, when they find out it's time to leave, it wasn't because they were having a bad day or a bad week. It was because there were more bad days than there were good. It was bad months, it was bad years. And that can be for a number of reasons. It could be, I'm not getting the job, I'm not feeling respected, I'm not having fun. There's a lot of different reasons for why people don't feel motivated or they want to leave. For me personally, I mentioned this before, but if I'm feeling like I have no growth trajectory, not necessarily in title or even responsibility, but if I'm not continuously learning, if I'm not challenging myself, if I find that when I step in a room, I'm no longer raising my hand and asking those questions, I start to realize pretty quickly that, this is no longer lighting that flame for me. And I think that's something that each of us need to really take stock of. Like, what are the things that are really important to you? And what are the things that really motivate you to be your best self? And for me, it's being able to be creative, being able to have fun and push boundaries in the marketing space. If I worked for a super safe, hands tied type of organization, I just wouldn't thrive there with bureaucracy and red tape. That's just not my style. I like to push the envelope. I like to do weird, different things. I like to be the first, even if that means we're going to fail. And so understanding that about myself has helped me to kind of carve out not necessarily exactly what I want to be in 5 years or where I want to work in 5 years, but the types of things that motivate me. And what's more important about that is you are able to really pinpoint when you don't have those things. Because if I'm not coming in every day and have this weird idea that I'm bringing to my team, then that probably means, I'm not being challenged or I don't have that spark anymore. And so I think for me, it has always been about understanding what gives me that spark. And when you know what that is, you really know when there's an absence of that. And it's okay if you don't have that, like I said, for a week, even for a month. But if that starts to become your reality, if you're looking back on a quarter and you realize, I've been feeling like this for a while, I haven't brought a good idea, I haven't, had a good win, then that's probably a red flag that you're either not in a place where that's going to happen, or you need to address that with your team, with your leader, with your organization to see if there is a path forward. They say, I think the saying, is trees don't grow into the sky. I think there are a lot of individuals who just tap out at their organizations. There's just no more for them there. And it's time to move on. There is a limit to what you can gain and what you can learn in certain situations. And it's our jobs. And again, it's being your own advocate to really understand when you are in those situations and to diagnose whether or not you can fix that where you are, or if you need to go elsewhere to seek that out.
I want to talk for just a little bit about what it looks like for each of us to be thriving at work. Now, this is going to look different for each of us. Shannon mentioned that when she's at her best, she'll be super creative. She's pushing the boundaries. She's coming up with off the wall or straight up, sometimes weird ideas. And for Shannon, this is an indicator that she's found the right type of environment. In previous episodes, we've talked quite a bit about the question of what are the conditions that enable you to thrive at work? But we haven't talked as much about the question of how do you know when you're there? This is, in essence, asking, what are the indicators that I'm thriving at work? Now, at the end of episode 70, I told a story about a team that I had worked with, and one of the success indicators this leader and I put in place, how we would be able to tell if his very risk-averse, security-oriented team members felt safe. And the indicator was that they would be innovating and bringing new ideas forward proactively or taking risks that they hadn't been previously. So that's an example of what might be an indicator that you're in the zone or in an environment that really makes you feel like you can bring your best. So what are those indicators for you? We'll come back to this topic in the wrap up with some questions for you to help you answer this question for yourself. So you're now the VP of marketing. Like, that's a big, impressive title. You have a team. Like, how cool. And I'm curious what the transition between someone who gets work done and does great work into someone who leads a team. Like, sitting here now saying, you have this great role and you have a team. Like, how does that feel to you?
It's really surreal, honestly. I actually talk about this from time to time, but I really believe there isn't enough training or conversation about that transition between individual contributor to leader of people. It is much harder than people give it credit for, if you care. For people who don't think it's an easy transition, they probably don't care as much about
probably
being
says
a good
something
leader.
About them. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. So I think it's something that I take very seriously. It's the most important part of my job, is being a good leader and knowing the way, going the way, showing the way. That's sort of my internal sort of management mantra. But I think, for me, that transition has been gradual. I work in a medium-sized organization, and this is something that I've found is a really good fit for me, because I do still like to have my hands in the pot, and I do still like to roll up my sleeves and be part of those conversations. And so I'm very lucky in that I haven't had to give up the things that I love to also take on this new, really important part of my job, which is, leading the new leaders of our organization and helping to understand who they want to be and what they want out of their careers, and finding opportunities for them to, grow. And, part of my job is making sure that they are on a path that is going to make them the best marketer that they can be. And that means that, I have to find those opportunities for them and help give them opportunities, even if I'm putting them in a situation where I think they might fail. That's learning, right? That's one of the best ways to learn. It has been a really empowering and exciting transition for me that people would trust me to lead others. But I also think it's been something that has made me a better marketer, made me a better person, certainly made me a better leader. But, I don't hire anybody who I don't think has the potential to grow, but who I'm not going to learn from. And I think that's really important to kind of understand, is that, we just hired a young, entry level, out of college woman for our social media, or really our content creation, content specialist. And, I learn more from her about Gen Z culture and social media and content creation, photo styling from her than I ever could have thought that I would. And I think that's so important, is that, when you're hiring people, when you're building a team, that it's not just you. Like, you're not there to you're not a teacher necessarily telling them everything that they need to know about their role. You need to really understand what makes them great, what they're going to bring to the table, what gaps they fill. And it's your job to amplify that. It's your job to, give them a place where they can elevate and really amplify the skills that they already have. And so I think that's the part of my role that I'm so excited about. And it's new for me, but it's something that I take very seriously. And, that's where I see my career really growing, and where I have a lot of room to learn, and where I'm putting a lot of my, personal growth right now is just how to be a better leader, how to be a better manager of people.
Yeah. You had mentioned you're someone who leads with a lot of transparency. Like, even the mantra that you have in your head of the way that you want to be a better leader, you're telling your team, like, hey, I do this thing and I'm going to be watching out for it. And also I'm sharing it with you so that you all know that I am aware of this thing. And, you said something about, like, if you're having a really bad day, you'll come into work and share like hey, there's other stuff going on in my life.
Yeah.
And so I may show up in this way today and it has nothing to do with you. And I think that that's a really cool thing. It's just like saying what's in your head out loud to people so that
Yeah.
they have that transparency. And
Yeah.
so I love that. And how do you think that impacts you and your team?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's true. I could be transparent to a fault, possibly. I think we're also human. People say this all the time, but we spend so much time at work with the people that we work with, and so to pretend that we're anything other than just real life human beings is just lazy and boring. And for me, and I've experienced this in the past. I knew really early on that if I ever got, in this seat where I was a leader, that I would be, painfully transparent to them, because I've been in situations where, I'm the type of person that really feels other people's emotions. And if my boss came in one day and they were frustrated or they slammed their office door, kept their door shut all day, I have an ego, I guess, because I would always be like, oh, it's me. It's something that I did. I did something
Yeah.
wrong, or, the company's not doing well, or, I would just get down this rabbit hole, this, millennial doom is what I call it. But I would just assume that it was something really, really bad. And so, today, like you said, if I'm having a bad day, or if, something's going wrong, if things are really busy and I know I'm going to be gone the whole day and my door is going to be shut, I try to be really honest with them to let them know exactly why that is, even if I can't tell them everything, right? There are certain things that, in these roles, you can't tell everything, but I do try to be really transparent, because I think it's incredibly important for them, again, to feel safe in their work, feel confident in their work, to know that it has nothing to do with them, that, my dog got out this morning and it ruined my whole morning routine, or I'm really stressed because I'm working on this project and I just need time to think through it. And just being transparent and, encouraging them to do the same, I think creates such better synergies on our team, and helps them to feel so much more comfortable coming to me, coming to each other, to kind of solve problems, or giving people the space that they need to get through that moment. And I think when you create an environment like that, it is such a better environment for, bringing your best self to work, because you don't have to pretend, right? Everybody has bad days. We've all been there. But you can come in knowing that you're going to have the space that you need to get through it and be better on the other side. And so that has always been something that, I've brought with me as a leader, and will continue to. And I think, being transparent, whether you lead people or not, is really important to just your mental health as well. Just not feeling like you have to hide who you are or how you're feeling every single day, especially in the climate that we're in right now. We work in marketing, so we have social media feeds up all day long, and you're seeing these things that are heavy, heavy things. So to pretend like you're anything other than, impacted by that is fake, and it can be really hard to tolerate. And so I think it's incredibly important, more than ever, to be transparent as a leader, but as a team member in general in the workplace.
Yeah, I mean, it goes back to what you mentioned early on of like Friday night Shannon is like the same person as Tuesday at 10 a.m. Shannon. And also how that can contribute to us like not being so exhausted by our work, right? When we feel like we
Yeah.
have to be something or show up a certain way, that does contribute to burnout long term.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, pretending like you're anything other than yourself, it's like you're an actor on a stage and the lights are on you. Like, it is really, really exhausting. It can be draining. And yeah, I mean, I think I want my team's energy focused on, doing their best work, making the biggest impact, not on pretending to be something that they're not, or pretending to be somewhere that they don't want to be. And so I think, if your focus is on, things that are actually going to help the company, help yourself, help your career, everybody's better off. And it's such a simple thing to do, is to tell people they can be themselves, right? It's difficult for many people, but I think if you really sit down and think about what you're asking and what you have to do to empower people to feel that way, it's not a hard ask, and the dividends that it pays are incredible. And I think, I hope that the team here would say that it has made them happier, has made their teamwork better, has made their output better. And again, it's not rocket science. It's not, anything super crazy philosophy. It's a really simple thing to instill.
So let's talk about the relationship between transparency and authenticity. Now, everyone is going to have a different level of comfort around opening up at work, whether that's sharing what might be going on for you in that moment or giving your team a heads up that you had a rough morning and might not be at your best for a few hours, just like Shannon mentioned she sometimes does with her team. It could be sharing personal stories or telling your team about past experiences, even things in your upbringing that have shaped who you are and how you lead. Now, there's so much value in all of these types of transparency. They build trust, they help you set the tone for safety and vulnerability, and they signal to your team what type of culture you want to create because you're going first by opening up and sharing more. And frankly, they just make you more human as a leader. And there is a such thing as oversharing. The objective here is not to unload all of your trauma onto your team so they know what you've been through. Frankly, I think most of us err on the side of maybe sharing too little, so I don't imagine that this is happening a lot for a lot of you, but the advice that's out there to be vulnerable as a leader could be confusing in this way. So 2 things to think about here is what feels safe versus unsafe to you, and in order to figure out what you might want to share with others. And that is going to be different for everybody. And then also asking yourself, why would I want to share this? Or why would I be sharing this? How does it help my people understand me better? Or maybe know what they should expect from me? Now, authenticity isn't oversharing just for the sake of sharing and building vulnerability, but sharing because it helps others understand us. Also, while we maintain whatever boundaries feel safe to us. When we can share more of us with the intention of helping our people understand who we are and why we show up the way that we do, that is really valuable transparency and leads to more authentic leadership. Okay, let's get back to Shannon and hear more about her style as a leader. And you mentioned fun a couple of times, so I'm curious, how do you, as a leader, create fun at work? How do you have fun at work?
I'm really lucky in that I actually do love what I do in terms of just, marketing in general. It inspires me. The actual work that we get to do is fun to me in general. So I think that helps. I don't think any of us should be doing anything that doesn't bring us, just general excitement to be there. But yeah, there's a lot of things that I try to do to just keep things light and inspirational and aspirational. We have we mentioned brainstorming a little bit, but we do a lot of, team meetings where, they're structured, but they're not boring, right? There's ideation, there's a lot of conversation, fun icebreakers. And I know icebreakers can be a little like cliche, but we try to just keep an overall very light and fun environment. I think, one of the things that has been really critical in my past couple roles, and I think is such a great communication tool to bring out who people really are, is just having some sort of chat enabled tool at your organization. So we use Microsoft Teams where we're able to chat with each other throughout the day. And that just fosters such a sort of friendly and fun environment. Like the amount of gifts that are sent in our team chat on a daily basis would probably set records. But it's just a fun way to keep things light and to remember that it's not that serious. Like we're not saving lives. Some people do, and that is serious. But we are in marketing and it's intended to be fun. We do our best work when we're having fun. And so I really think, having some of these little tools, whether it's just team chats or, team outings, or just the general day to day, knowing that people can, crack a joke in a meeting or bring a crazy idea or share certain things that they've seen in the marketplace. I think, to me, that has been really critical to having fun at work is, making sure you're hiring fun people who, work well together, who are energized by the work that they're doing, but also, don't take themselves too seriously. And I think that's a really, really important part of like my hiring mentality and also my personal sort of brand is just, at the end of the day, we're all, a speck on a planet that's, we're just a small piece of this bigger picture. And to not take myself or my work too seriously and just to, look at all of the opportunities we have to, have fun and create really new and unique things. Like that's something to be really grateful for. Not everybody has that opportunity. And so more than anything, it's just about creating an environment where people feel like they can be silly or be funny or have a bad idea. And the rest just kind of happens on its own.
Yeah. And so what have been some of the things that have helped you grow along the way? I know a lot of it is noticing what you don't like and not doing that anymore, but you've talked a little bit about mentors being really valuable. What else has helped you grow personally and professionally?
Yeah. So, I have a lot of great mentors. I actually, a couple of years ago, kind of established my own sort of personal board of directors, if you will, of people who I kind of go to when I am having different types of issues. I have my really close knit group of like friends and family. So, my mom and my sister and, people who I go to talk to when I know that I need those words of affirmation, or my friend and college roommate, Kristen, she's probably like my biggest cheerleader on the planet. I was recently mentioned in a small thing in the Wall Street Journal, and she printed and framed this giant Wall Street Journal article and sent it to my house. And so just having people like that who energize you and remind you of the progress that you're making, because you can really get in this little hamster wheel, right? Of that wasn't a big deal. And they remind you it is a big deal, right?
No, it's a big deal. Yeah.
Yeah. And then I also have, more, workplace mentors. So at Rubik's, my current role, Allison Miller is a huge influence on me. She kind of oversees the marketing work for us. And she has been an incredible mentor in helping me sort of navigate this organization and the branding element and just giving me kind of the hard advice that I need to deal with some of the things that I've never dealt with. And she's someone who I respect from a career standpoint, but who I know is always going to be very blunt and transparent with me, and is not to say she hurts my feelings, because she doesn't, but she will say things that I need to hear versus my friends who will say, "You're great, you're awesome, you're amazing." She keeps it very real because she knows it's important. Exactly. She knows it's important to boosting my career. I think, also I'm aware of the things that I'm not great at. So, speaking engagements and being a public speaker, those are things that don't come naturally to me. I'm uncomfortable. I'm not confident when I'm doing that, like public speaking. And so I actually had the opportunity here to work with a speech coach, Matt Eventoff. And so he's helped me tremendously on preparation and managing some of the things that, I know are true challenges for me when doing more public speaking. And so I think, just this idea that you're always a student, right? It's okay to go and take a class, like get a coach, get someone who's going to help you improve on the things that you need that support with. So, I've done that. And I think too, the other piece of just, I have a lot of people who say they don't have a mentor, they can't find a mentor. And that's a real thing. It's hard to find people who will take time to work with you outside of business hours. But I think we are very fortunate to live in an age where there are thousands of mentors online. Some of the people that I have learned the most from, I have never met. People on podcasts, books, social posts. I learned so much from, the internet and just really getting exposure to people who I really respect, and just trying to expose myself as much as I possibly can to the, inspirational leaders who I've seen do really incredible things, and trying to just adopt some of those behaviors. And then lastly, I would say, I mentioned I made sort of my own board of directors, but I also, for the first time last year, really sat down and kind of thought about myself as a brand and made my own sort of core values and, really tried to create sort of a North Star for myself. And I think that has helped me over the past year and sort of identifying kind of where I want to go and being a little bit more intentional than I've ever been while still leaving, a little room for luck and serendipity, the things that really got me here in the first place.
So what's next for you in how you want to grow as a person or as a leader?
A lot of the actually core values that I kind of wrote down are themes that we've already been talking about, curiosity and caring a lot and staying, courageous. And I think some of the things personally that I'm really looking forward to is doing a better job or a more intentional job of building I hate to say this because it sounds so posh, but like my personal brand on channels like LinkedIn. So, as you've probably gathered, my career is very important to me. It is my work day, but it's also sort of become a hobby to me. I'm really passionate about the marketing industry as a whole. And so I'm really focused this year on, building kind of my own sort of content strategy for Shannon on LinkedIn versus just managing my brand accounts. And one of the things I think is so ironic is a lot of, social media managers and people that work in social media, they typically don't have big brand or personal followings because they just don't have time to focus on their personal, social accounts and social brands. And so I've always carried that kind of mentality, just always focused on the brand. And so I really want to focus on, my personal brand and like doing a better job of more consistent sort of posting and writing and learning, because it is a really, really interesting time in marketing right now. The industry is really changing. We're kind of at this tipping point with technology and social and what it means. And so I think if I don't sort of spend a lot of time in this education phase and marketing, we'll get really behind both personally and professionally. So that's a big focus of mine.
Well, thank you for being on. Thank you for sharing about your career and a lot of good lessons that you've learned along the way that I think are going to be really helpful for people. So
yeah, thank you so much for the opportunity. It's great to catch up with you. And this has been really, really fun and inspiring. And I'm, always honored and grateful to be in your presence. So thanks so much for having me.
Okay, this is a really fun conversation. Shannon is a rising star in the food and beverage space, and I really appreciate leaders like her who are reflective and open about what they do well, but also where they need to grow and really care about the humans in their organizations. That was very, very apparent from talking to Shannon. In this episode, we talked about how she's built her career, casting this really wide net to gain a lot of experiences, and then moving toward what she loves and moving away from what she doesn't. And we talked about some of the more difficult moments in her journey and how she's come away from those times with the desire to create safety for her team when it comes to creative work and the benefits that she sees in being transparent with her people. And we covered a lot more. Now, Shannon also mentioned how she's re-inspired to be more intentional about her own personal brand. And if you're interested in that topic, I have a great episode for you with myself and my friend Kat Coffrin, where we dive deep into this topic. What is a personal brand? How do you build it? Why does it feel icky? How to get over it? And that is episode 61. So we'll link that in the show notes. Now, I want to come back to the topic that I mentioned before. How do you know when you're thriving at work? What are the indicators for you personally? And can you use those to know when something's off, maybe not a good fit or a good environment, or maybe as a little check engine light for how you're taking care of yourself and balancing everything that you have going on in your life? Now, for Shannon, she mentioned that if she's in her element, she's getting super creative. She's thinking outside of the box. She's even coming up with really weird off-the-wall ideas and able to really be free in that way. Now, I mentioned a team that I worked with where several of the folks on the team were behaving in a way that was more risk-averse and just kind of following direction or being reactive to work that was coming across their desks instead of being proactive and acting as owners and leaders of their brands. And after we put some interventions in place with the leader, we aligned that an indicator for these folks to know that they were feeling safe and thriving in an environment was if they started bringing in their own new ideas and pushing things forward proactively. So I'm curious for you, how do you know when you're thriving? A couple of things that you can reflect on. How will you feel when you're starting your workday if you're thriving at work? How will you feel when you're ending your day? What emotional state and mental state will you be in as you get work done? Maybe you're feeling really productive, effective, capable. Maybe you're feeling really connected and motivated and passionate. How do you know when you're in that great state? How will you feel? And another question is, what will you be doing differently? How would you show up? How would you act? How would you behave? Maybe think about when you know you're burned out and consider what is the opposite of that. So for me, when I'm burned out, I often feel unmotivated or having like this lack of energy to work on stuff that in my mind, I know I would normally be really excited about. So for me, I know I'm thriving when I experience the opposite of that. When ideas come to me and I have that surge of motivation and energy to go take action on it right away and create something. And I'm not just contemplating the thing, but actually really feeling excited to move it forward. So maybe if you're normally someone who's a little more passive, doesn't speak up a lot, or doesn't share things proactively, if you're thriving, maybe you might see yourself being more proactive and speaking up more. If you're someone who's more of a people pleaser and you normally kind of go along with what others need, when you're thriving, would you be pushing boundaries and really not overthinking how others would perceive you? Maybe you even would be turning some people off or being a little polarizing instead of being pleasing to people all the time. Now, if you're normally kind of a perfectionist and you're thriving, would you be instead embracing good enough and not getting stuck in that final 10% improvement phase or overworking on something that isn't really that high of an impact? So this isn't much different than when we set business goals at work. I want to grow my business and I know that I've achieved it if I hit X dollars in sales or X percent growth in market share. It's just really about getting very clear and concrete about what are the benchmarks that you can identify that help you know when you're thriving. So what kind of mental state, emotional state might you be in? How will you know when you've gotten there? And how will you be behaving or acting differently? Consider that, and I'd love to hear what you come up with.